Hello everyone, I'm Lisa Wieben. I'm a centered riding instructor, an essential somatics practitioner, and I'm also certified in Eden Energy Medicine, or Eden Method as it's now called. So today I'm bringing you the topic of breathing. So breathing is super important in riding, and you've probably noticed at times when you've had a little bit of tension or if your horse is spooked, that all of a sudden we get tense and we hold our breath or we breathe up a little bit higher into our chest. So we're going to talk about how we can bring that breath down and be a little bit more grounded with our horse. So to start with, I want you just to take a moment and take a nice deep breath in and see where that breath goes. So let's take a nice inhale. And if you're like most people, that breath probably came a little bit higher in your chest than it did down in your belly. So take another moment and we're going to put one hand on our chest and one hand on our belly. And see if you can move that breath a little bit deeper into your body. So as you inhale, see if you can keep the top hand still as the bottom hand can allow that expansion. So inhaling and exhaling. So you probably notice now that there's more awareness down into your center. And what that does is it activates your diaphragm. So when we're in this shallow breathing, what can happen is your diaphragm doesn't actually drop down and the ribs don't fully expand. So a lot of things can happen with that is we're not getting a lot of oxygen into our lungs because they're not expanding fully. This can lead to tiredness and maybe not as clear of thinking. So we want to get that oxygen into our blood and we want to breathe deeper and let that diaphragm move. So along with that is when we're holding our breath or breathing shallowly, there's also going to be a lot more tension in your body. So when we breathe deeper, it allows us just to let everything go and kind of follow along with the movement of our horse. So let's take that awareness back down here again. And if you want to keep your hand on the top, you can. And think again about breathing into that bottom hand. And just notice how your body feels when you breathe that much deeper. I even started to feel myself get a little bit more onto my chair as I did that last breath. So as kind of awareness exercise, I'm going to have you breathe into different parts of your lungs. So let's bring that hand up top again, and you're going to breathe into that top hand. So you probably notice how your chest lifted, your shoulders lifted. There might have been a little bit of tension through your neck. Let's do that one more time. And you might also notice how you get a little bit lighter in your seat. So if we're breathing like that all the time and we're riding our horse, we might be a little bit tippier if they spook especially. So we want to keep bringing that awareness down into our center. So now let's bring our awareness over to our ribs. So we're going to feel in that breath that our rib cage expands. So if you hold your hands on your rib cage, see if you can move your hands away from each other. So we're going to inhale. So the rib cage is expanding, and you can even hold your hands this way, maybe a little bit lower on your ribs, and see if we can get that breath down a little bit deeper into our rib cage. So as we're sending that breath down low, we can still bring awareness to the ribs. And notice with this next breath, as we expand the ribs, do both sides of the ribs expand evenly? Or is one side just a little bit tighter in those ribs? So let's do that again. So sometimes when we've had injuries, the little muscles between our ribs, the intercostals, can get a little bit tighter so they don't allow that expansion to happen, which is something I'll talk about further on in some somatics videos I'll do. But for now, let's just notice if that sensation is there, and then you can start bringing more awareness to the side that's maybe a little bit tighter. So one more time. So it's just allowing that expansion to happen. So now if I turn this way, I want you to bring some awareness into this kind of mid upper back, upper rib area, and see if you can send your breath into your back and allow your lungs to expand out towards the back of your body. So as you inhale, and as you do that, you might notice that your back kind of rounds, the front of your body gets a little bit tighter, but we're fully opening up the back of the body with the breath. Good. And what these exercises are doing is they're just bringing awareness to the different parts of your body to see if there's any tension being held there. So if you can't fully contract and release your ribs in those different areas, then you're probably holding a little bit of tension through those areas. So you can just kind of focus on where you need a little bit extra awareness. And when you're breathing into the back, that's not an area that we tend to bring a lot of awareness to. So it might be a little bit harder than it was to breathe into your front. So let's take this back to when we're riding. So I want you to think more about breathing down into your center. And I use the breath when I ride to help me with my transitions. I use it as a half halt. So when I inhale, I think about inhaling and growing tall. So not like bringing my breath up into my chest. I'm still breathing down into my center, but I'm allowing my body to get a little bit lighter. So as I inhale, I'm just allowing my spine to get long. And then as I exhale, if I'm doing a downward transition, I exhale and get a little bit heavier into my seat. So I feel more connected with my horse, just like grounding. And then if I'm doing an upward transition, I think of that inhale again. So that inhale is like a warning to my horse that something's coming. And then if I exhale and think forward and light, then I'm doing an upward transition. So I might have a little bit more scoop to my seat if I'm going into a bigger trot or my canter transition. My seat is going to be that cue while my breath is preparing my horse for that transition. So half halts and transitions, super important that we keep breathing through the transition. What that also does is as we're following along with our horse, our body's moving with our horse. If we hold our breath even for a split second while we go into that transition, our hips are going to stop moving with our horse. So keeping that breath, thinking about exhaling through the transition will keep your body flowing with your horse and make it easier for your horse to keep his rhythm and keep his flow. So I see that a lot of times, especially in a canter transition. A person will be trotting along quite nicely and then they go to ask for the canter and all of a sudden everything gets tight. And they put their legs on and the horse kind of jumps into the canter transition. So if we're breathing and we're just allowing our body to follow with the horse, makes it a lot easier for the horse to understand what we're asking for. So a couple of things I wanted to bring in this video is some ideas on lung health. So in Chinese medicine or energy medicine, we can help our lungs by using the lung meridian. So the lung meridian starts up by the shoulder, basically the top of the lungs, and it goes down the shoulder and off our thumb. So we can do what's called flushing the meridian, which is like cleaning out a pipe and then sending fresh energy in. So we do this by tracing the meridian backwards. So you go from your thumb all the way up to that lung point. We do that once, and then we're going to trace forward 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. So that just brings in some fresh energy to lung, and we'll do that on the other side as well. So we're going to trace backwards once and then forward 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. And again, that's just bringing fresh energy to the lungs. So now another point that we can use on the lung meridian is called a source point. So a source point is like it is an acupressure point. So it's used in Chinese medicine. And it's a point on that meridian that holds a little bit more energy than some of the other points. So it's kind of like an overflow of energy. And when we rub that point, it sends more energy into the organ itself. So in this case, the lungs. So if you follow the meridian down, and there's a little bit of a dip just under your thumb, right in the wrist crease. So if you rub that point, sometimes it might be a little bit tender, and that means there is congested energy in that point, and you definitely want to rub it. So if you're rubbing that point, you can say 20, 30 seconds to rub that point. And you can also make little tiny figure 8s over that point. So figure 8s really send a lot of energy to the area. So I'm just making little tiny figure 8s. And then of course, what we do on one side of the body, we want to do on the other side. So again, follow your lung meridian down, find that little dip in the wrist crease, and then rub that point for 20 to 30 seconds. And then you could also figure eight that point if you want. And source points you can also tap. So sometimes that just lets that energy in that area move along a little bit more. So I like to rub mine. Sometimes I'll do this while I'm watching TV and just rub all my source points to give my organs a little bit more energy. So another way we can work with lung is using the neurovasculars. So neurovasculars is more of an emotional response, and it's using points on your head that relate to blood flow on your head. So when we get stressed, the blood flow moves from the brain and moves into your body, into the center of the body and into the limbs for that fight, flight, and freeze response. So in relation to lungs, lungs relate to grief on the Chinese medicine wheel. And this could be taking on the grief of the world, as we're seeing all these people dying all over the world. And if we get stuck in that, it can start to affect our lungs. So the way we can work with this area is we can put one hand on our forehead, which is called the main neurovasculars, and these affect all the neurovasculars on your head and a lot of the energy systems in the body. So even just holding your forehead for a time will help that stress start to drain. And then if you take your other hand on top of your head, there's a point right at the top of your head, and it's a lung point. So by holding this point, you can think about the stress that you have. In this case, we're thinking about grief. And if I'm holding these points for one of my clients, I'll sometimes have them think about the stress, because you want to acknowledge that your body is feeling this stress. And it could be they've lost someone close to them recently, or again, they're feeling the weight of the world. And we're going to sink into that feeling as we breathe deeply. And then you can start to think of a more positive aspect of that lung meridian, which is inspiration. So right now we're seeing a lot of people being inspired and helping one another and making masks and delivering meals and helping their neighbors. And it's wonderful to see. So if you start to think about that emotion of inspiration and see how that can impact your body, and take a few deep breaths as you're holding these points, it can help you shift out of that stress response that your body is holding on to. And this can help clear your lungs of that heaviness and that grief. So again, we want to acknowledge the emotion that's there, but we want to be able to move past that emotion into the more positive aspect of the emotion. And you can hold these points for as long as you need to, as long as it feels good. And you might even start to feel a little pulsing underneath your hands as the blood flow starts to come back up into your head and into your brain. And after you've held these points, I'm sure you'll feel a lot calmer and more relaxed. And if you do this on the couch, you can lay back and let your arms rest on a pillow, which makes it a lot easier to hold these points. All right, so there's a few things that you can try for your lungs and your breathing and your riding. So until next time, I'll see you soon. Bye.